All right, so welcome. Good morning. I'm Emily Pfotenhauer. I work with WiLS. My title is Digital Strategist and Grants Manager. And I've been working with the Ideas to Action program since we started it in 2018. And this is the first year we've done a webinar as just a way to connect with WiLS members and walk through the application a little more closely, and then talk with you and get your questions about how the program works, but also projects you might be thinking about or ideas you're looking for feedback on. And as we mentioned, the session is going to be recorded and it'll be shared for the full WiLS membership after today. And so we also have Kim here with me, Kim Kiesewetter. Kim, you want to introduce yourself?
Totally. Thank you, Emily. I'm Kim. For anyone who I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I also work at WiLS, and my title is Data Analyst and Consultant, and I am the fearless sidekick. I won't even call myself a co-chair to Emily on the Ideas to Action Committee. She does so much work on this fund, and I feel honored to be able to work with her on it and thankful for how organized she is with everything that we do. And so I will share a little background information and some key dates with you all here in a few moments before passing the baton back to Emily to talk about some different tips and strategies for preparing your proposal. So before we jump into that, to acknowledge, we are celebrating at WiLS being around for 50 years, which is kind of crazy to consider. We've been in different iterations as we've gone along, but this is a big milestone for us, and we are celebrating all year. Simultaneously, in terms of numbers that make me happy, we have had the Ideas to Action Fund in place for 5 years now. So we're celebrating 5 years of Ideas to Action at the same time as celebrating 50 years of WiLS. So today we're going to spend an hour-ish with you all sharing about the Ideas to Action Fund, and we'll begin our time together reviewing the background and purpose of the Ideas to Action Fund, key things to know about the process, including dates, and tips for putting together a strong proposal before we transition into an open question period. However, this is super informal. Please don't hesitate to ask questions as we go along. You do not need to hold it until the end if we say something that inspires a question or you would like us to clarify something that we've just said. So both Andy and I will be keeping an eye on the chat. So feel free. It's Friday. I won't be able to speak English very well. Feel free to drop your questions into the chat as we go along if you have something more pressing. Otherwise, at the end, we should have plenty of time for you all to bounce ideas off of us or ask, any more detailed questions that may not relate to this content. So in 2018, just for background information, the WiLS board established the Ideas to Action Fund with 3 key goals in mind. The first one is to encourage collaboration between WiLS members as well as their community partners. The second is to support innovative and exploratory new ideas. And the third is to develop processes and resources to benefit the broader Wisconsin library community. So at WiLS, we've strived to create a really clear and simple process for libraries to apply that doesn't involve super heavy, cumbersome grant reporting requirements. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And if you have participated in submitting an application in the past to the Ideas to Action Fund, hopefully it hasn't been a super stressful process for you all. And we do this to keep the fund agile and dynamic to the diverse and evolving needs of libraries. We also strive to make sure that reporting is as straightforward as possible. So should you be awarded a grant either this funding cycle or sometime in the possible, broadly, it involves simply providing a midpoint blog about your project and a very simple, straightforward final report that we share out from WiLS with a short survey at the end of a few key data points that we collect. I'm going to just briefly share some, wait for it, data points about the Ideas to Action Fund and some dates and guidelines with you all that you can have on your radar for the next application period if you're interested in applying. First, I want to give a shout out to Andy for making this beautiful graphic. What would we do without you? Since its inception in 2018, Ideas to Action has been able to fund 30 projects from across the state of Wisconsin. We value the ability to reach libraries and their community partners from all throughout the state. So we love having dots from the far reaches of every corner of Wisconsin. You can see the geographic reach of the fund in this infographic provided on the slide, in addition to some example projects from across the last 4 funding cycles. So we've had everything from memory cafes for older patrons to STEAM field days for a K through 12 school to the creation of a multisensory healing room space in a library. So Ideas to Action projects are unique, they're creative, they're innovative in nature. And Emily and I actually intentionally didn't want to go into a ton of detail about previously funded projects because we want you to dream big. We don't want you to feel like you're being walked into any certain specific idea. We are definitely excited by unique, new, innovative projects. And it's really neat as someone who's been able to review for the last year and this year projects, how creative you all are and some of the amazing work that you all are doing across the state. In addition, we welcome proposals from all types of libraries, and we love, once again, seeing the diversity of ideas that come from you all based on library type. So you can see here that a little over half of funded projects thus far have come from public libraries. Public libraries also make up a comparable percent of the applications we receive, and the other half come from special academic and K through 12 libraries. So we have representation from all kinds of different types of libraries and organizations there. While there's no required number of people reached per project, we have started gathering that data just so we have something that we can share out there. And as part of the reporting process, we do ask moving forward that WiLS, that funded projects report back to WiLS roughly the number of people reached so that we can keep creating an average for the fund. So as of 2021, on average, 153 people are reached per Ideas to Action project. That's an average. So we have projects that are much lower than that. And we've had projects that have had very high reach there, but on average, it comes out to 153. In addition to the funding that Ideas to Action provides, applicants are also welcome to solicit funds from other organizations. So we surveyed previous Ideas to Action fund recipients last year, and half of the respondents indicated that they did end up securing additional funding for their project from at least one other entity. And that could be a community partner, foundation, other grant monies, things of that nature. But there's nothing on our end that prevents people from being able to solicit funds from multiple places in order to create and fulfill the goals of their project. So here's some key things to know, moving on from the background, about the Ideas to Action Fund and the application process. First of all, you can apply for up to $5,000. Ask for what you need. So we aren't more or less likely to select a project based on if they did a full ask or not. So you don't need to worry about that impacting in terms of the selection criteria that we look for there. In 2022, we'll be awarding $35,000 in total for projects. So that means at a minimum, we will be able to fund 7 projects if everybody did a full 5K ask. If there were ones that were lower, it could be potentially a couple more projects there. Instead of or in addition to funding, members can apply for WiLS staff time to support project planning, facilitation, survey design, marketing, or other project activities as well. In order to apply, you must be a WiLS member. This is free and it's not hard to do. You can apply on the WiLS website if you are not already a general member, but that is a part of the application process. And once the application period is over for the fund, all proposals are reviewed by a committee. So for this year, the committee will be composed of 4 board members and 2 WiLS staff members. The committee makes the proposal selections together as a group. And in a moment, I'll be passing the baton to Emily, who will be sharing some tips for preparing your proposal and some of the items that the committee considers and that make for a strong proposal during the review process. So some key dates for 2022. Next week, the fund opens on April 11th. We will receive application all the way through June 6th. So the application period will run April 11th through June 6th. In June and July, the committee will begin the proposal review process. And in August, we will notify all applicants whether they were funded or not. So we let people know one way or another. And then in September, funds are distributed and projects begin. And roughly, projects work on an annual-ish basis. And we have a point person liaison for projects who will work with you to make sure that you have a timeline that works for your project, because sometimes we know that things don't perfectly line up there depending on the timeline for when activities will be happening. So those are the background information, kind of key information and key dates. Before we move on to putting together a strong proposal, did anyone have any questions just about that background information and the dates that I just shared? Okay, awesome. If you think of something, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. And I'm going to pass this over now to Emily.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Actually, before we get to this one, can you go back one, just because I had a couple of big picture things to share, although I think I'm repeating maybe what you've already said. But the main thing to know is that we do aim to keep this proposal process as kind of lightweight and simple as possible. And so to do that, we use a Google form. There will be a Google form. It's not available on the website yet, but it'll be up opening on Monday when the proposal period opens. So on Monday, you can go to the WiLS website and find this form. A big part of it is just kind of those general questions about contact information and institution type and those kinds of things. And then what I'm going to do today is walk through, there's really 5 main narrative questions on that form. So I'm going to walk through each of those and kind of give you some ideas of what we're looking for and what some things you might consider as you're responding to those main narrative questions. So you can go ahead to the next one, thanks. So first question of those narrative questions on that Google form is related to need and audience. And the question you'll see on the form says, briefly describe the problem or need you're aiming to address in your library or community. Provide examples of the target audiences for this project. So this is the place to tell us why you're pursuing this project and also who you're pursuing it with. So any partners you might be working with. And this is really where you should make your case for why this proposed project is important to your library and to your community. We want to see that you're not taking on a project just because it's like cool and new and shiny, but that it'll help address a particular need or problem or challenge that you've identified. You should also use this space to tell us a little bit about how you determine that need. That could be formally or informally. You might have information from a community survey or conversations with patrons, demographic information, any kind of formal or informal evidence that kind of supports your case for why this is a need. And then if your project is addressing a community-based need, reviewers are going to be looking for some information about how you're going to work with partners in your community to address that need. So a really good example of this is a project from the first cycle, the 2018 cycle of Ideas to Action. This is a project by the Carl Junginger Memorial Library in Waterloo. And their goal was to put to bring more Latinx patrons into the library. And since they are in a small community, there weren't a lot of community organizations pre-existing that might support this, like a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or other established organizations. So they did some creative partnering where they partnered with a local business that employs Spanish-speaking migrant workers. They partnered with a translator, and the library staff and the translator arranged meetings with those workers through this business to talk with them, learn more about their needs, and tell them more about what the library could offer. So in general, this is your chance to show us what you need and why, and who you'll be taking this journey with on your project. Go to the next one. Thank you. So impact. So this asks you, how will the project have a positive impact on the broader Wisconsin library community? And how can project inputs be reused or outputs rather, not inputs, could be reused or adapted by other WiLS members. So one of the big goals of the Ideas to Action Fund is that it's kind of an ideas incubator for the Wisconsin library community. Goal of WiLS is to support the development of processes or methods or resources that can be used by other WiLS members. So this question is your chance to tell us about that potential broad impact. What are you going to be doing or creating, learning that can be shared with your peers? Sorry, was there a question? So let's see. So a good example of this sort of demonstrating impact and telling us about what the impact will be is from the Lodi Public Library. I did a project in 2019 to work with high school students to teach them podcasting. And at the end of their project, they shared a number of pieces of documentation. They shared a whole list of project, the equipment that they purchased, where they got it, how much it costs. That is sort of this nice outline list of, if your library was going to build a podcasting studio, here's what you might need. And then they also shared the syllabus from that class that outlined over 7 weeks how sort of the steps that they walked students through to learn this process. So those are two really great resources that other libraries can use and adapt and borrow from. All right, and then the next 3 questions that I'm going to talk about are all a little bit more nuts and bolts for a project. So first one there is the plan and timeline. So this question is going to ask you to outline your strategy for completing this project and identify any major deadlines or goalposts. This is your chance to outline your action plan for carrying out the project. It doesn't mean that you're going to be locked into that exact plan and exact timeline if your project's funded. But we do want to see that you've thought through the core steps in the process and you have a good sense of the time frame that you need to complete those steps. And then one thing I put on here that we look at in particular is the start date and end date. We want to see that those are realistic and attainable. A big thing to keep in mind is that the funds will be distributed in September, and you can start your project work anytime after that. Sometimes we see project proposals that are outlining a start date right away. They're talking about starting in June. Sometimes we see proposals where folks are planning an event that's going to take place in October. Those, given the overall time frame of when we're funding these projects, those kind of stand out as that they're not going to fit in with how we're funding the work. So we're looking for a start date that is realistic, and then also an end date that's realistic. You have up to 2 years to finish a project, but most projects take less time than that. Often a year or even less. We do want to keep the project timeline open-ended, but we also want to see a plan for an end. It's not meant to just be sort of an ongoing open-ended initiative. Next piece of the puzzle is evaluation. So this question asks, how do you plan to evaluate your project and what might success look like? Those are obviously super open-ended as far as evaluation. And I'm looking at Kim here because we're not asking you to do any sort of heavy lifting as far as data collection, but we do want you to have a plan to collect and report some basic information. So if you're offering events, we want you to have a plan to collect the number of attendees at those events. If you're building kits or doing some kind of equipment circulation or checkouts, have a plan in place for how you're going to track that. So essentially just some numbers that demonstrate the engagement and results that you're seeing. The other half of that question is the more open-ended, what might success look like, which is really more of that kind of vision of what's the change you want to see, going back to the need that you addressed. What do you see as the change or improvement or enhancement that comes out of your work? And then I put this in here because I didn't have another good place to put it. Kim mentioned this already. We do have some minimal reporting requirements other than sharing that evaluation information. We'll also ask you for a short blog post for the WiLS website about halfway through your project, and then a final written report, and we'll provide a framework for that, some specific questions to answer with that report. And then the last question I'll dive into is the project budget. And again, we're trying to keep this as simple, lightweight as we can. We're not going to ask you to submit an itemized budget, but we do need to see expenses broken out within general categories. And those categories are going to be different for every project, so it's really up to you to determine what they are. Some examples might be things like consulting fees, honoraria or speaker fees, software, equipment, hardware, other tools, materials, supplies, printing or other marketing activities. So breaking out your overall project into some general categories and then a cost amount for each category. And just so you know, we do distribute the funds up front at the beginning of the project. You don't need to request reimbursements or provide receipts or financial reports. We ask you to outline the general costs, and then we'll support those costs that you tell us. All right, so those are the 5 main kind of narrative questions on the form, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more generally about some of our priorities and some things we might be less likely to fund. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions for me? And feel free to use the chat for those. And I think Andy or Kim has put in a couple of links to some of the projects I mentioned previously. Those are in chat too. All right, so funding priorities. So the WiLS board is especially interested in a few different types of projects. It doesn't mean that those are guaranteed funding or anything like that, but just that we have our eye on some areas that we haven't reached as much. One of those is really just kind of more of a reminder that you don't need to feel obligated to request the full amount. If you have a small project, if you know that you just need a small amount of funds, there's no minimum request. You can request up to 5,000, but if you just need a small amount of funds to test out a new idea or to experiment with something new, this is a good opportunity for that. In general, we're really interested in helping our members reach underserved or underrepresented or ignored segments of their communities. As you saw in the map earlier, we've aimed to have a pretty broad geographic reach for these projects around the state. And we know that the Northwoods, the northern northwest part of the state, and the southwest part of the state in particular are areas that we've had some reach in, but we would really love to work with more libraries in those parts of the state. And then we do accept applications, of course, from all kinds of member types. You do not have to be a library. We work with cultural organizations, museums, historical societies. We had a grantee from the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation last year. So any type of organization that qualifies for our general WiLS membership is welcome to apply. And then I did just want to mention a couple of things that we see come in that we may be less likely to fund, just because those are less aligned with the priorities of what the fund is doing. Since we want to have a broad reach or broad impact on the broader Wisconsin library community, we like to see things that are shareable or repeatable or replicable. Sometimes we get requests for projects that are kind of more infrastructure projects, like buying new shelving or signage or kind of things that are limited to a specific sort of space in one specific location. So those might be less, we might see those as less relevant to what we're aiming to do with the fund. We're also, because we're looking for innovation and collaboration, we're obviously happy to see and encourage already established programs to keep doing that work, but sort of continuing to fund an already existing entity is not really what we're looking to do, unless this is something you've got a great established program and you've got a new idea, a new direction, new audience you want to reach. That's the piece that would really fit well into the ideas to action. Another thing that we get requests for sometimes that we're probably less likely to fund are an author visit, especially if it's, you know, we want to bring in a really cool author. Their honorarium is $5,000. We're going to spend the full grant on, you know, an author fee. Those obviously are great events. They're really important. And we could see it fitting as part of ideas to action if the kind of community engagement portion of that was really clear, that it wasn't just a one-time event, but that the author was going to do a workshop with local high school students, or just other ways that this kind of grows beyond a one-time, one-shot thing, essentially. And then the other thing, and this is really sort of case by case, but the idea of salary costs, absolutely, this is something you can use funding for, supporting an intern, a consultant, adding staff time to somebody who's part-time to do this specific project. But if you're dedicating, and then another area where this would work really well in a K-12 library is that sort of teacher buyout time. The kind of exception to that, or the thing we'd be less likely to fund, is if you've got full-time staff working on this project, they are hopefully funded in other ways. And so this wouldn't be the way to fund part of their salary. Of course, all of these are, they don't mean that the project is ineligible or off the table, and we're happy to talk to you if you've got specific questions about any of those things I just mentioned. And then my last slide here is just to recap those core goals of the program. If you keep these in mind as you develop your project and as you write your proposal, this is really the core of what we're looking for, is those pieces of collaboration, either with other libraries, their organizations, with community partners. Innovation and exploration, that doesn't have to mean that it's a brand new, never been done before anywhere ever innovation. It could be an innovation you've seen done in another library that you're being inspired to adapt and build on and explore in your own direction. And then whatever work you're doing resulting in something that is going to benefit the broader Wisconsin library community that we can share and help build the overall community. So I wanted to mention a couple of things before questions. One is that both Kim and I and other WiLS staff are available to talk through any project ideas. We've got lots of time now. We can do that now, but you're also very welcome to get in touch with us anytime to talk through an idea. Particularly if you're an organization that has applied in the past and hasn't been funded, we encourage you to connect, and we can talk through how we might help evolve the project to really make it a strong, strong ideas to action program. So we've got tons of time. If people have questions, please go ahead and ask. I think I actually have the email addresses on the next screen too. Excuse me.
Look at you being so prepared.
I have a question. I'm
Mhm.
Kelly from Oregon Public Library. So in the several years ago, I was able to get funding for a set of iPads, mini iPads in that I use for like a stop motion programs. And the iPads have since are now too old and they need to be updated. They're not taking the iOS, but I haven't, well, the pandemic and that, it's my idea is to get newer iPads and maybe some Chromebooks to do some STEM programming with the youth center in town. because they're really interested in STEM stuff, and kids have always enjoyed the stop motion. So it's not, I'm like, I guess I'm like trying to resurrect a former program that I haven't run in like 5 years. Would this grant be something? I mean, like it would be more of I'm buying the iPads for programming use. We do circulate non-traditional things like maker kits and things like that. But this would be help support programming that we focus around that collection, and doing outreach to our youth center, which does serve a lot of it's the most diverse part of Oregon, and it serves a lot of kids that are, minorities and underrepresented populations in Oregon. So I guess, what are your thoughts about my idea?
I think that sounds like a good fit. I think what I would focus on, I suppose, is, rather than that it's resurrecting an old program, that it's building on, enhancing, sort of using what you learned previously to reach a new group you haven't worked with. I think getting the community, sorry, I missed the name of the organization, but the community center, whatever the group is.
The Oregon Youth Center. Yeah.
Thanks.
And it serves like the middle school age, like 5th grade to 9th grade.
So yeah, I think having them on board as a partner, and kind of using this to build up that partnership would be a really good fit. And like the equipment is, like, I think what we look for is the something, investing in something kind of static, like iPads is totally fine, as long as it's like in support of engagement and programming and that kind of thing. If the proposal was, we have old iPads and we need new iPads, that wouldn't get you very far. But using that as a piece of this, we're going to do this cool thing, engaging students and reaching parts of the community we haven't reached, all those things. This is like the tool to do that engagement.
Oh, great. Yeah. And too, we have in our community a local filmmaker who works with the public access cable. And so he's done workshops in the past for me, and they're really great. Okay, good. This is exciting.
Everybody. We have been talking about this for a long time at Northern Waters, and we have a really, actually quite a good list of ideas. But when I look at this list, I think, well, what this takes is staff time, and that's where we're coming up short. So do you care if I'm going to just rattle 7 things off and you say, put your energy into that, okay? So we had thought about doing something with intellectual freedom, partnering with our schools. We have already started a large project to put more inclusive subject headings into our library catalog. That is, something that falls completely on the shoulders of system staff. But we would like to tell our members more about that and let our community know more about that work. We have in our strategic plan, marketing and advocacy for local stakeholders and government. And we're imagining that to be something like a presentation to give to county boards, or a handout that goes to Rotary clubs or things like that of the benefits and what Northern Waters does for our patrons. We have tribal libraries in our library system, and one idea is to have something to make our tribal libraries and our public libraries kind of root for each other more, whether that's an event with a speaker or some buzz around that. It's kind of a special thing about Northern Waters that I think is worth promoting, but how? We also have a mail-a-book program that we do have staff time that's devoted to it, and it does have a core group of patrons, but we haven't promoted it. We haven't expanded it since it's been years. And I think that that service is even, the pandemic has even changed that service a little, in that the people who are using it are a little more tech savvy. They're interested in digital resources and things like that. And then the last thing on my list is, at a meeting recently, we talked about patrons in crisis, and we have a couple of libraries who are very close to their county jails. And how the conversation started is, often when someone gets released from being in the county jail, they're literally sent to the library, and they don't have, they have a phone number maybe, but they don't have any money, they don't have anything. So something to help them. But then also out of that came the idea of some sort of partnership with our county jails to provide them with materials, like a paperback collection that is complete, that gets an infusion of books monthly or weekly, or however we could make that happen. So Jackie is on this call too. Jackie, do you have anything you want to add?
No, you summarized that really well. Really, what Gina and I do all day is sit around and think of ways that we can work more. That's exactly what we're doing.
I love that description.
Kim, I think that's sometimes what you and Melissa do all day too.
I think that is what Melissa and I do all day.
So wow, so this is a really
Emily
great.
literally got her head in her hands. Like, what are we gonna do with those people?
No. So this is an awesome list. So I think the first, and without knowing further detail about any of these, I think the first things I'm like honing in on are, where is there community collaboration, and then like what is replicable or informative, or what else will be of value to the Wisconsin library community. So either other library systems, since you're a system, or other public libraries, just kind of like, what is that, which of these things are things that like other public libraries or systems might be able to learn from or reuse. So I think the what kind of jumped out at me was the marketing and advocacy, specifically if that's targeted at I think you said boards or like other community organizations. So that's sort of a different, I know there's always, I know it's always a topic at WLA and all around the state of, the importance of advocacy and like showing the value of libraries. I don't know how that it's been talked about as much towards like that particular audience, like having like presentations or tools that you could bring to something like the Kiwanis Club or whatever. That would be really interesting, and I could see that getting used by all kinds of libraries. I think the tribal library public library partnership is super cool. I think that would be, I think what folks would look for when they're reviewing a proposal for a project like that would be that it was a very mutual collaboration, that it wasn't that you were having this idea and then if it was funded, you were going to approach these tribal libraries to see if they wanted to do it, but that, they were in it from the beginning, that you had a mutual plan that was going to be that everybody, all parties were going to be involved in developing it and seeing it through. But I mean, all of these are, clearly they're, they're needs that you've identified. They're specific things that, that you need and your libraries need and their patrons need. So it's hard to pick one. Does that help at all?
Maybe.
So we should apply for all of them. That's what you're saying.
I think, gosh, I don't know. I think each of these I would need like more detail before I could do a whole lot more.
Yes, I feel the same way. I love all of these ideas. I think when just from the basic description, the tribal library is one jumped out at me as one that could potentially be really strong. And I actually really loved the last one you were sharing about the county jail potential. If there was a clear way to do a partnership or collaboration there, that one I thought was really interesting and unique. But to Emily's point, the ones you feel the most confident about having the resources to carry out on your side, that you feel already you would be able to have that collaborative piece there, is probably the bigger priority in terms of like what makes the most sense for you all to do. But those are great ideas. Maybe you should just give us all the ideas and other people, we can all just carry them out somehow.
Well, and I think we have some of this that is in our strategic plan, but we have some of this that isn't, but we are going into a new planning cycle. So, maybe that will help us. So thanks for the feedback.
All right, do you have any other questions or thoughts? I think that is all then. Like we said, we are happy to chat with you one-on-one. You can email either of us. Excuse me. And the application's open on April 11th, so that's this Monday. And you've got a little bit less than 2 months to get those in.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today. And don't hesitate to reach out. And it's always really fun to see you all. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Friday.
Woohoo! Bye, y'all.